Elorkum Vanakkam. Good evening, friends. I'm Sujata Shankar, convener of INTACH Chennai chapter. Warm welcome to each of you who's joined us today, to the members and friends of INTACH. A special welcome to Dr. R. Nagaswamy, the doyen of archaeology, epigraphy, and the heritage of our region, and to Dr. Sunitha Madhavan, granddaughter of Rai Bahadur, Sri V.Venkayya, about whom we will hear from both of them this evening. Dr. Nagaswamy just conveyed that he's feeling a bit tired, but we have a recording that he did yesterday, so we will play that. A brief word about INTACH. It's the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, set up 37 years ago in 1984 as a non-profit organization with a vision to spearhead heritage awareness and conservation in India and to protect India's vast, unprotected, built, cultural, intangible, and natural heritage. INTACH is today considered the largest heritage organization in India, with chapters across the country numbering over 200. At Chennai chapter, we've been through programs like today, creating awareness about the significance of our heritage. INTACH Chennai chapter's programs are posted on Instagram and the Facebook page of INTACH Chennai chapter. You can also mail us at intachchennaichapter@gmail.com if you wish to be on our mailing list or become members. We look forward to all of you joining us. World Heritage Week is observed by UNESCO every year from November 19th to 25th as a celebration of the rich, tangible and intangible heritage of the world. We had a talk earlier this week on the history and heritage of Hyderabad on November 22nd. And today we are very happy to bring to you a lecture on Sri V.Venkayya's seminal contribution to epigraphy in India. As the cliche goes, Dr. Nagaswamy hardly requires an introduction, but it's my duty and honor to spell out some of his key achievements. Ramachandran Nagaswamy, historian, archaeologist, and epigraphist, is a doyen in the field of temple inscriptions and art history. He served as a director of archaeology for 22 years as the vice chancellor and is the vice chancellor of Kanchipuram University. He was also instrumental in starting the annual Chidambaram Natyanjali Festival in Chidambaram in 1980. Dr. Nagaswamy has specialized in the fields of art and architecture, epigraphy, numismatics, ancient law and society, and South Asian art. He has published over 40 books in English, Sanskrit, and Tamil, and has authored over 300 research articles in reputed journals. His contribution to South Indian dance and music is immense. He's conducted several excavations, underwater archaeological surveys, in collaboration with the National Oceanographic Survey. Dr. Nagaswamy has lectured in leading universities and museums all over the world. Dr. Nagaswamy made archaeology a very popular subject in Tamil Nadu, especially among children, through publication of pocketbook guides. He was also responsible for involving several thousand school and college students in cleaning and preserving nearby historical places and monuments. He also popularized monuments by bringing out guides in the form of newspapers priced at 10 paise per copy. He was responsible for protecting several historic monuments like the 1st century Chera inscriptions at Pugalur, the palace site of the imperial Cholas at Gangaikonda Cholapuram, the famous 17th century Tirumalai Nayakar Palace at Madurai, the 17th century Danish fort at Tranquebar, and the birthplace of the great national poet Subramanya Bharati at Ettayapuram, besides excavating the palace site of Veerapandya Kattabomman at Panchalam Kurichi. Acknowledged as an expert in archaeology, his appearance in the London High Court for the Nataraja case as a witness on behalf of the Government of India enabled the country to get back the idol. He is considered an authority on Jonah Bronzes, and at the Nataraja trial, the judge of the London High Court remarked in his judgment, Dr. Nagaswamy is an unequaled expert in this subject. Born in 1930, Dr. Nagaswamy has been awarded by numerous organizations, among which are the Kalaimamani by the Tamil Nadu government and for his path-breaking work on Sekiyar's Periyapuranam and the Padma Bhushan in 2018. I request that the video be shared on Dr. Nagaswamy's talk.
I am thankful to Mrs. Sujata, organizer of INTACH, Tamil Nadu, and also Sunitha Madhavan, the granddaughter of Bahadur V.Venkayya, for giving me this opportunity to participate in the inaugural lecture on the first epigraphist, Indian epigraphist of India, Bahadur V.Venkayya. Before I say about his contribution, I want to remind you that we have a tendency in India to glorify all historical events into legends and myths. And under the legends and mythological narrations or the Puranas, the real facts about the history and culture remains buried. And it's not exclusive only to India, but here we have more tendency to narrate everything as what we call Puranas. Very early we had Vedas, beautiful poetry, outstanding poetry, and following it we had what we call Smriti, Dharmasastras, and then Indians were conscious of historical facts as well, and so they wrote two great epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. These were called Itihasa, Iti-ihasa. This is how it happened here. So at that point of time they were conscious of giving proper history. And then it was followed by what is called Puranas, 18 Mahapuranas. And gradually more and more Mahapuranas came into existence. Now, I can cite three important heritage sites in Tamil Nadu, which got originally as what you call Purana. One is Mahabalipuram, The second side is, I'll come to it later. Mahabalipuram was considered from around the 16th century onwards the town of King Mahabali. There was one Englishman, William Willett. He was for some time here, sometime in 1960s. And he has written a book called Bibliography, Annotated Bibliography of Mahabalipuram. And there he traces many of the accounts as given by many visitors to Mahabalipuram from around 16th century. So in the 16th century, Mahabalipuram was completely lost in Purana, myth. That's because the two Itihasas were great and also the Puranas were great. So, the 5 monolithic temples of Dharmaraja Ratha, Bhima Ratha, and Sahadeva Ratha, and Draupadi Ratha, and also Sahadeva Ratha in Mahabalipuram, that group was called the Pancha Pandava Rathas, named after the Pancha Pandavas of Mahabharata. So, we don't know who actually made it, but we started calling it the Pancha Pandava Rathas. Similarly, there was one excavated cave behind the present Stalasayana Perumal temple in the center of Mahabalipuram, which was a great excavated cave temple, like the Mahishasura Mardini cave, Varaha cave and so on. It had originally a shrine in the center dedicated to Shiva and Vishnu, Shiva and Parvati. And then on either side of the wall we had beautiful sculptures of Durga and Mahalakshmi. But little later, 16th, 17th century, when many people started coming to Mahabalipuram as a religious pilgrim center, it was the birthplace of what we call Bodhatavar, and there is also a Pushkarini there. And so they used to come and take bath and then go and worship Lord Vishnu in his Salasayana form in the center of the temple, as the center of the village. So, the situation was that it became a great Vaishnavite center. And this excavated cave temple was used for taking the image of Ramanuja, the founder of Vishishtadvaita philosophy, who was greatly worshipped and adored. And during the annual festival, his image used to be taken there. And so the cave came to be called Ramanuja Mandapa, though it had some other type of sculptures. This is another legend associated with Mahabalipuram. So by 17th century, it was completely glorified as Mahabalipuram. The earliest reference to Mahabalipuram is, it was called Mahamallai or Kadal Mallai. Kalangal Yangum Mallai, Kadal Mallai Talasayanam, Vanangu Manattaravari, Vanangu Indian Madanangi says, Alvar. So it was also known as Mallai. Kadalmalai, a prosperous town, merchant town. But by 17th century it became a great center of Vaishnava pilgrimage. What happened? Now there is a cave temple behind what you call Arjuna's penance, and there you have got beautiful sculpture, luckily well preserved still. One is Varaha, and opposite it there is a Trivikrama sculpture. Beautiful Trivikrama sculpture. And Trivikrama sculpture is a Puranic legend, where the Rakshasa king Mahabali is portrayed, and Vishnu as Trivikrama in his Trivikrama Avatara subdues him by sending him to the Patal Loka. So it is a beautiful depiction, wonderful depiction of the legend of Mahabali. So the visitors to this town, they started calling it after this Rakshasa, Mahabali. So originally this was the place of Mahabali, Mahabalipuram. So what was the original name of Mahabalipuram was lost now from Kadalmalai and started being called Mahabalipuram. So, in what you call, these are all called the large number of monuments, large number of cave temples, monolithic temples, and open air sculpture. These are all there in Mahabalipuram. These are all forgotten and it became the town of the Rakshasa Mahabali. So under these circumstances, in the 18th century beginning, the sailage from Pondicherry along the east coast coming up to Fort St. George here in Madras, they used to see these sculptures, and also they used to go to Southeast Asia. And you know, there is a beautiful cave temple with eyes as a halo, circle, semicircle, excavated cave in Mahabalipuram, which is called Tiger Cave. This has nothing to do with the tiger, but these are all Vyalas, and in between there was a small shrine that was called, and the local people call it Tiger Cave. And these people who sailors who came, they saw this Vyala face, and they were reminded of Chinese and the Thais, Thailand. Thailand was then called as Siam. And so these sculptures were originally carved by Chinese, like the Chinese dragon, and also Siamese. So this is how people of the 18th century, they knew Kadalmalai becoming what you call Mahabalipuram and a center of these Chinese and Siamese. There were some writings there, but no one could understand what it is. Now it must be said to the credit of the colonial rulers to appoint officers to study ancient written documents in India. And there are two purposes. One, they wanted to rule this country and to know culture and life of the people so that they can administer. The second one, among them there are genuine scholars, wonderful scholars, outstanding scholars, not only from England but also from Germany, from France, from Holland, from all these places. There are great Sanskrit scholars very good Sanskrit scholars, outstanding Sanskrit scholars. And there was one such outstanding German scholar, Sanskrit scholar, who was greatly interested in Sanskrit inscriptions. He was the first epigraphist. Epigraphy means reading inscriptions on the walls of the temple. Also, on copper plate grants of the kings, which were issued as donation, as document of donations. So, but at that time, the inscriptions, the letters were not fully deciphered, fully understood. So there are not many people who could read these things. And so you have the stories of Siamese and Chinese and so on. And also the sculpture giving it Mahabalipuram and so on. So his name is German scholar, Hulsch, Professor Hulsch, somewhere around the later part of 19th century. And he was sitting down in Mahabalipuram and trying to read these letters. No one has read the letters on the monuments. And he was struggling. And a young man came just to see Mahabalipuram. He stood behind him. And he saw this white man, German man, German scholar, struggling to read those inscriptions. This boy who was looking at those things, he immediately could recognize, though these were the earlier form of Grantha script, and he read, Atyanta Kamo Nrupatihi. So, Hulsch was surprised. Who is this? He just turned back. And this boy was standing there. He said, do you know how to read these inscriptions? He said, yes, I can, with some efforts. He said, where did you learn this? He said, I am a Brahmin. As a young boy at home, we were taught slokas, Sanskrit slokas, to recite in praise of our gods and goddesses. And we used to read these slokas, these Sanskrit verses, in Grantha characters. Grantha is a form of letter written to indicate the Sanskrit construction. So we know how to read Sanskrit letters, Sanskrit poetry. So, read the second line. With some struggle, he immediately read the second line. Then he asked him, he turned towards him, asked him to sit down. What is your name? He said, my name is Venkayya. What is your qualification? He said, I am a graduate, science graduate. Then Hulsch asked him, where are you working? He said, I am working in a company, some scientific company. Then he said, that is not the place for you. This is the place for you. Will you join me as my assistant and work in this, studying these inscriptions and inscriptions? Venkayya was very happy. A white man inviting him as an expert to help him. He said, yes, I'll come. Immediately, Hulsch rang up to the British here, who were then the rulers of this part of the country. He said, here is a brilliant boy, a brilliant man, I want him to be appointed as my assistant to read inscriptions. And that's how Mr. V.Venkayya was appointed as his assistant. Now, this Venkayya rose up to very great heights later under the direction and instruction and teaching of Pulch. Now, he read Atyanta Kamolpati Nirjita Arahati Mandala Kyaso Ranajayo Sambhu Tena Idam Besna Karitam. Tena Idam Besna Karitam. This temple was made by, caused to be made by a king who is called Atyanta Kama. Suddenly, what was all these years? And there was also other passages he read, and he could read the name of Mamalla, and he could read the name Pallava. I can give you the whole thing, but that's not the main purpose. The purpose is that he could read the whole inscription of the rock written by the original makers in the 7th and 8th century AD. That is a turning point in the history of Tamil Nadu, cultural history of Tamil Nadu, which gave us insight into that these were carved and caused to be made by the dynasty called Pallavas in Kanchipuram at that point of time, around 700 AD. And then we could now correlate the 5 rathas, what they call 5 rathas or 5 monolithic temples, and history of architecture of Tamil Nadu, the skill of Tamil artisans to carve such beautiful things. So all this culture, history of architecture, history of poetry, and this dynasty who caused this to be made, and beautiful poetry, lovely poetry written 700 AD. So, it was a turning point in knowing the name of the person who carved these images, who caused this to be made on the rock, the seashore temple built, and everywhere there is the inscription, everywhere you could read it. And so, for the first time, the Rakshasas were vanquished. They were buried. And the story of the actual people who caused it to be made, human beings like us who caused this to be made, came into existence. And that is the contribution of Mr. Venkayya. Venkayya was assistant, and he was another assistant on Krishna Sastri. And he learned how to edit these inscriptions. When you read the inscription, you cannot simply just write like that. You have to read it, you have to copy it, number 1 line, 2 line, 3rd line, 4th line, 5th line. And if there are any mistakes in the writing, it should not be corrected there, it should be put down underneath. All this, the process of reading, the process of editing, the process of publishing, were all taught to Venkayya and also Krishna Sastri by Hult. And in 1892, they brought out a book under the editorship of Hult, the German scholar, in 1892. Before 1892, it was the town of the Rakshasa. Now, after 1892, it became the town of the Pallavas. They were the original contributors to Tamil culture. They were the contributors to heritage. And it was possible because Venkayya is a Sanskrit scholar. steeped in Indian culture, particularly in Tamil Nadu. And so he gave something like in a gold plate. Here is the history of your country. Here is your history of your culture, architecture, painting. At the same time, he also studied the inscription in Kanchipuram on a beautiful temple which was built by him. Rajasimha, Rajasimho Ranajayaha, Sri Bharat Chitra Karmukaha. He read that. And so they connected this Mahabalipuram to Kanchipuram great temple called Kailasanada temple, where you have the inscriptions there. Fantastic. And remember, at that time, we knew, Venkayya knew, the local weight standards, local use of many technical words in mathematics, in iconography, the forms of gods and goddesses, the history and so on. That was almost the time when a palm leaf manuscript was found in Kerala, and that gave a beautiful Sanskrit drama, a satire, Mattavilasa Prahasana, and that gave the name of the Pallava king Mahendravarman. And then that is also the time when copper plates were found. Copper plates means the king gives a land or something like that, and he uses the details. What is the area he has given, what is the tax in that, and how to protect it, who to protect it, who should use it, and all this all written on the copper plate. There we got in every copper plate at the beginning, who is the king who gave this? Just as we say today, 2220 or something like that. There they used to say the 15th year of the king, so and so. And in that they found, in one of the copper plate inscriptions, the Pallavas, one of the Pallava, somewhat of that period, he went and conquered right up to Badami in North Karnataka, South Maharashtra. And there he has left the inscription. And he had the title Mahamandra. So they could immediately connect that this town was established. And then later on many more inscriptions came to be read and understood and connected with this. And so there is the whole history of the Pallavas. This place was known as Mahamandapuram. And the Pallavas were the people who caused this to be made. And these inscriptions are not donations. In ancient times, they used to give any gift that used to be written down as a document. That's called Dana Patra. But these were called proclamations, pronouncement. Something like, this king has done such and such thing, like that. This is another type of document. Some of the copper plates are like that. And in Mahabalipuram, all of them are not donations, but the proclamation of the king, so and so God this made done. So it is history. So what a great contribution, wonderful contribution. And remember, the colonial scholars, some of them were greatly interested, out of their own interest, encouraged the study of these inscriptions. And in 1892, they published one volume, big volume, giving the original reading, the translation in English, and also some photographs of it. And that is how Mahabalipuram, which was last Mahabali the Rakshasa, now came up as the creation of Pallava rulers. And That was the starting point of Indian Tamil Nadu culture history, art history, architecture history, historical data and so on. And that was possible, and that was a contribution. And when the Hulsh retired as epigraphist, he wrote to the Director General of British at Delhi and made him the first Indian to have served as epigraphy, the director of epigraphy of India. And that is the contribution of Venkayya. So what they did, they honored him. The British honored him with the title Rai Bahadur. Just as now we have what you call Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan and so on. At that time, outstanding contributors to history, art and culture were honored by the British colonialists with the title Rai Bahadur, and Venkayya was honored with the title Rai Bahadur Venkayya. And he's I'm glad to say that the book has been written by Sunitha Madhavan, and she will be speaking after me about his contribution. And there was a fight. Sunitha wrote to me that you write a biography of what is his name, Venkayya. I told her I may know some aspects of his life, but she is the granddaughter of Venkayya, who is going to speak. And so I said, you know more and you will have the attachment towards your family and tradition. And so you yourself write, I am ready to help you. And I got it published from my own foundation, Tamil Arts Academy, and she published it. And I am very happy to say that we know more about this great man who made not only Venkayya read only not only this. There are other aspects. It's another place which has also completely submerged under the Rakshasas. This place is nothing but the great town Tanjavur. That great monumental structure rising up to 216 feet. People do not know who built it. And around about 1890s, in the 18th century, when that part was ruled by the Marathas, this temple was under their control. So they found no history, and at that time they used to write Puranas. So there is one Brihadishwara Mahatmya about that great Brihadishwara temple, Brihadishwara temple. What does it say? It says there was one Rakshasa named Sanjasura, and he was troubling the area, and so people went and pray to what you call Lord Shiva, and that town was at that time known as Kulotunga, some old name they have heard, and Kulotunga spirit. That king requested Shiva, and Shiva destroyed Tanjasura, and ever since this became Tanjapuri. But it is the same Hulsh who went and copied the inscriptions. One of the greatest contribution to Tamil culture is by that great temple of Tanjore, and on the base of it you have the Etat Visvarupa Sreni Mauli Mala Upadaltam Sasanam Rajarajasya Rajakesari Varmanaha. It says, this inscription is there. Then, the same thing is given also in Tamil. Tanjavur Nam Edupitchu Tirukattadi Sri Rajarajeshwaramudayalpi. Nam Koduttanavu. Nam Pendugal Koduttanavu. Nam Akkan Koduttanavu. Mattum Koduttar Koduttanavu. Kallile Vettira. Says Rajakesari Varman Rajaraja, which was read by Venkayya. He also published it. The whole great inscription. So suddenly, Tanjasura vanished. It became Tanjapuri, and the temple was erected by Raja to as a dedication to Shiva, named after him as Rajarajeshwaram. Wonderful. I have no time to discuss or tell you about what is there, what an amount of inscription, what an amount of history, what an amount of social history, what an amount of revenue history. Everything is written down on the walls and pillars of Tanjavur temple, in pillars, on the base of the temple. And he says that Raja covered the whole temple with gold. Can you imagine? 216 feet height. Rajarajeshwaram Ponvainda Sri Rajaraja Devar. The inscription is there, the authenticity. So, this inscription of construction by Rajaraja and all other inscriptions of donation to the temple were also edited under the title of, under the guidance of Hulch, the German professor, by Venkayya, who published it in South Indian Inscription Volume 2. Extraordinary work. And there, as Rajaraja mentions, the mentions of the measurements, moyam, and so on also weight, also the coins, what is the value of the land for say one valley of land and so on, who are there as dancers, musicians, architect of the temple, all these are there written down by Rajaraja himself, and these have come into existence. We are able to know more about it by the publication of Mr. Venkayya. And the third important place, that's a place called Uttaramelur, 50 miles away from Madras. And there, 10th century, that is one earlier to Rajaraja, in the time of the Chola, Parantaka, as an inscription. How people were elected to the assemblies to govern themselves. It's called local democracy, village democracy. What are the qualifications of the people who have to stand for election? Disqualification, punishment, how they should continue and render account and so on. An extraordinary 1,000-year-old constitution of democracy, not found in any part of the world in written form. At 1000 AD, was there. It is there. That was also copied and published by Venkayya. Now, what happened? We had great kings who brought in these monumental structures, heritage, monumental heritage. But now after democracy, has no rule. This democracy has empowered the parties which win the election to take over everything, anything, and do whatever they want. So what happened? The great Mahamandapuram. I had been there in 1959, 60 years back. It used to be so beautiful, clean, no encroachment, absolutely no encroachment. So you can see all these sculptures in the pristine beauty, pristine purity. But now the whole Mahabalipuram has been occupied. It's all completely encroached, and you go to some monument, somebody will come and ask a ticket for keeping your car here, and give me ticket, and so on. It's absolutely unimaginable how we have destroyed the environment of this whole Mahabalipuram character. As one Devi Devarajan, she tried to do something, and she gave a sort of a plan. And so, one diversion, instead of going into the village and spoiling the whole surroundings, they did put a diversion road. But the whole village also went, the diversion also gone. Everything encroached. So, it's history of these monuments which are preserved or protected. After great several centuries after the making, we have come to know about its author, about its contribution to the culture, and now it's all gradually being submerged by this encroachment of petty vendors. It's the same thing. Approach to Kanchi temple. I mean, all over India, wherever there is great temple, the world people come. They come and admire that. They are all petty shops, topi, and bangle, selling all these things around. And so we are not keeping up the culture. We are not keeping up the environment. We are not allowing the people. This is not a place for learning. Yes, population is growing. That does not mean you go and take and occupy a culture, 1,000-year-old monument. But there is nobody who can stop it. This power, freedom power, has made us completely lost this, and that is why the Indian National Trust for Art and Culture, INTACH was formed. And wherever the governmental power is not on the right track, it was intended to give a call to them, tell them this is a heritage monument, this is a history monument, your own monument, your own ancestors have made it, you please protect it. This was the main aim of INTACH. And no organization can do anything under the present circumstances. I am glad that I was a member, I am a lifetime member of INTACH. But Siddhartha is trying to maintain it, at least by organizing some meetings. And the government and the people. Government should realize the value of such institutions and try to support them. The people should understand and give a helping hand to preserve their own culture. It's not the European culture. It's not the Chinese culture. It is your own culture, your own art, your own history. We know only to hate one language. If V.Venkayya was not there with the knowledge of Sanskrit, this would have continued to be Mahabharata continued to be under the Rakshasa rule. So, I am very glad that Venkayya's contribution is recognized, though he died sometime in the first part of 20th century. His life, you read that book, it's a very important book on Raj Sahab Venkayya, his contribution to Mahabalipuram, his contribution to Tanjore, his contribution. But there are many other temples also where he has studied. The one published them as chief epigraphist. Chief epigraphist of Government of India, the first chief epigraphist of Government of India, appointed by the British. And so I am only a descendant of Venkayya because I am the first director of archaeology in Tamil Nadu. And thanks Sujata and Sunitha was one good book. He has written a very good book. I am very happy that this endowment lecture is being started, and I wish all success on this and also both having such meetings. Thank you very much.
I'd like to say a big thanks to Dr. Nagaswamy for that enriching journey through epigraphy and Dr. Venkayya's contribution and discovery of history through the various temples and their inscriptions. May I now welcome Dr. Sunitha Madhavan to give her presentation on her grandfather. I will briefly introduce her. Venkayya's great-granddaughter, Srimati Sunitha Madhavan, is a double gold medalist from the University of Madras. She has, to her credit, teaching experience of 30 years at various colleges in Chennai, Epigraphy College for Women, SIET College, Meenakshi College, and many others. She retired in 2002 as professor and head of the Department of Economics from Meenakshi College. She is now settled in Washington and has authored the biography of her remarkable ancestor. I'll just show you this book. I hope you're able to see it. Whom we just heard Dr. Nagaswamy elaborate about Valayathur Venkayya, who is a great historian who served as the first epigraphist of India and who resurrected the factual history of South India from its written records and made known to the world greatest of Tamil monuments. Welcome, Dr. Sunitha.
May I request you to unmute yourself, Sunitha madam? It's on mute, your video.
You have to click.
Sunitha ma'am? Yeah, you can now start your presentation.
Am I seen on the screen? Am I heard?
Yes, you're audible. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, may I make a beginning?
Please do.
Namaskaram, everybody. With immense gratification, I'm participating in today's program. I profusely thank the organizers at the Indian National Trust for art and archaeology for making this wonderful event possible. They had provided us with a golden opportunity of listening to Dr. R. Nagaswamy, the Colossus in South Indian epigraphy and archaeology, a living legend in our own times, speak on the legendary epigraphist Rai Bahadur V.Venkayya. It would have been most appropriate had it not been for his health concerns if Dr. Nagaswamy had rendered a full-scale presentation on the contributions of Venkayya to South Indian epigraphy. When Srimati Sujata Shankar approached me on the matter, I was both elated and alarmed. I was reminded of Kavi Chakravarti Kamban, who, in the opening of his Ramakatha, compared himself to a cat seized with the desire of drinking and emptying the whole of the milk ocean. ஓஷை பெற்றுயர் பாக்கடல் உற்று ஒரு பூசை முற்றவும் நக்குபுக்கென ஆசை பற்றி அறையலுற்றேன். That was Kamban's modesty out of scholarly erudition. I am in genuine fear to approach the ground trodden by stalwarts. Both Venkayya and Dr. Nagaswamy had filled so vast a space in the history of South India that has made all scholars and students owe a great burden of debt to them. For today's talk, the focus, as explained by Dr. Nagaswamy, will be on 3 places of historic interest. And these 3 heritage sites have made news in this millennium. Mahabalipuram or Mamallapuram had been the chosen venue for the informal meet of Prime Minister Modi and the Chinese president. The big temple at Tanjavur, built by Emperor Rajaraja Cholan, witnessed great pomp and show for having withstood the test of time for more than 1,000 years. The Uttaramallur records were proclaimed to be the standing testimonial of India being one of the earliest democracies in the world by Prime Minister Modi just last December, when the Bhumi Puja was done for the new parliament building. In all these places, it was Venkayya who discovered and deciphered the inscriptions. Dr. Nagaswamy had authored excellent books on all of them. Now, before we proceed further, we will take a fleeting view of the background and the events that went into the making of the great epigraphist of epic proportions. Venkayya was born on 1st July 1864, in the village Valayathur, in the lineage of the Advaita philosopher Appaya Dikshidhar. His father was Brahmasri Appa Sitaramayar. Venkayya learnt the Vedas and the Tamil devotional texts from his father. The photograph that you are seeing here is produced from Mahaubadhyaya U.V. Swaminatha Iyer's autobiography, Yan Charitram, with his original name, Venkayya. Learning the Vedas and the Tamil literature, in fact, endowed him with the wonderful gift of deciphering temple inscriptions, because the two ancient languages, Sanskrit and Tamil, are the two cornerstones for South Indian epigraphy. Most of the records are bilingual in this region. For formal school learning, he was sent to Chittoor and he studied in a Telugu medium school with English as one of the languages. Chittoor is a place that has seen a lot of political upheavals, the net result of which was it became a multilingual, heterogeneous administrative unit. Venkayya, with his flair for languages, was the beneficiary. For higher education, he joined the Madras Christian College, which at that time was just opposite the Madras High Court. The head of the institution, Reverend Dr. Miller, on seeing the potential in Venkayya, started the college annual magazine, to which later on Hulsh, Venkayya, Sakkote Krishnaswamy Iyengar, P. Sundaram Pillai of Manonmaniyam fame, and so many other scholars had contributed scholarly articles. Venkayya graduated in physics with distinction. Systematic analysis and scientific methodology coursed through his veins. Dr. Miller offered him the job of a high school science teacher in Anderson's Missionary High School in Kanchipuram. Venkayya's stay in that temple town greatly impacted him. He was particularly enthralled by the Kailasanada temple with its splendorous sculptures and intriguing inscriptions. So the year he joined as a school teacher, 1886, during the winter holidays, the Christmas vacation, he took a trip to Mahabalipuram to see more of Pallava art. There, his momentous meeting with Dr. Hulsh turned a new leaf in his career. Dr. Hulsh, yes? Am I clear? Hello? Am I clear?
Very much.
clear, very clear.
Yes, please carry on.
Okay, I'll proceed. Dr. Hulsh was a German Indologist who had just then, on 21st of November 1886, joined the Epigraphy branch of the Archaeological Survey of India. He was the only man in the department. He had come down to Mahabalipuram to copy the inscriptions. On meeting Venkayya at that place, he was convinced that this young man, with his linguistic attainments, holds the profile of a very good paleographist. So without observing any formalities, straightway he offered him to take him on as his assistant. Venkayya too was interested, given the prospects for scholarly pursuits in the field. But he wanted to complete the academic year at the school. So the following year, 1887, on 30th of April, he joined the Madras Epigraphy department as assistant to Dr. Hulsh. Hulsh was jubilant. Immediately he set off on a field trip to Mahabalipuram with his intelligent and efficient assistant, as he would write to the chief secretary later. This photograph of Hulsh was sent by him to Venkayya as a Christmas present when he had resigned from the department and voyaged back to his fatherland. This photograph, along with the letters he wrote to Venkayya from Germany, were given to Max Muller-Bhavan at their request for publication. When Venkayya and Hulsh met at Mahabalipuram, the place looked like this, heaped in white sand. And this photograph is taken from Epigraphia Indica, the flagship research journal of the Archaeological Survey of India. Now, why did they start, the duo, Venkayya and Hulsh, start copying inscriptions at this place? This is because most of the well-documented records for South Indian history are available only from the 7th century. And that was when the Pallavas were at the height of their power. So it is that we have landed in Mahabalipuram now. Here you have the Pancharathas, the foremost of which will be the Bhimaratha. Now, a French historian by name Joe Dubouville wrote a book on Pallava antiquities. There he says that in the Dharmaraja Ratha, on the 3rd floor, at the entrance, there is an inscription that reads, Adyantakama Pallaveshwara. Hulsh was perplexed. Who is this Pallava king? Identification of places and persons in inscriptions is a formidable, challenging task. Venkayya immediately identified him. He is none other than Rajasimha Pallava, Narasimhan II, the builder of his favorite Kailasanada temple in Kanchipuram. Now, this Atyantakama title acquired by Rajasimha Pallava, Narasimha II, what does it mean? It is explained by Dr. Nagasamy in the paper he presented to the Archaeological Society of South India way back in 1962. Atyantakama means one with boundless desire. Rajasimha Pallava was possessed with the desire of building temples for Lord Shiva. And it must be noted that among the numerous titles, birudas that he had, like Ranajaya, Sribara, Sridhara, there is one Mahamalla. It is not that Narasimhan I had the title of the great wrestler. Rajasimha Pallava had this same title, Mahamalla, which he was fond of repeating. Now, we are at the Shore Temple. Mamallapuram is a place where you have not only Pallava inscriptions, but also Chola inscriptions. Rajaraja Chola, Rajendra Chola inscriptions are there, and they all give an account of their military conquests. The original name of the place, we are told, is Kadal Malai, and the deity as the Jalasayana Deva. The Chola inscriptions also tell us the names of the 3 shrines found at the place: Kshatriya Simha Pallava Ishvara, Rajasimha Pallava Ishvara, and Pallikondaruliya Devar. The last one is very clear. It refers to the huge reclining idol of Vishnu at that place. Now, these two, Venkayya maintained, are the titles of the same king, Rajasimha Pallava Narasimhan II. Later on, when he wrote an article on the Pallavas in the Archaeological Survey of India, he surmised the whole of the Shore temple must have been built by the Pallava Rajasimha, who constructed the Kailasanada temple at Kanchipuram. Dr. Nagasamy, in his books on Mahabalipuram, also has attributed all monuments in Mahabalipuram, Mamallapuram, to Rajasimha Pallava. Yes, let us have a look at the Pallava Script. These are the estampages, that is, inked impression of the inscriptions found on the walls. At the Dharmaraja Ratha, which had been mentioned earlier, they were prepared by Venkayya himself for Hulsh and taken from Epigraphia Indica Journal, volume 10. The script that they used was unique and called as Pallava Grantha. It itself is very ornamental and has an aesthetic appeal. Near Mahabalipuram, there is another place, Salwankuppam, and there on stone you see the Pallava Grantha. Inscriptions on stones are called lithic records. And here again we are confronted with the name Atyantakama Pallaveshwara. So the next destination for Hulsh and Venkayya from Mahabalipuram and surrounding areas ought to be only Kanchipuram Kailasanada temple. Here you have Pallava Grantha. Now, at this point, I have to acknowledge the help provided by Mr. Mohan Nagasamy, who gave me the illustrations of Salwankuppam inscriptions seen earlier and this one taken from Kailasanada temple, and both from Dr. Nagasamy's books on them. This temple is replete with inscriptions running all over the place. From the central shrine, it spills all around the outer portion of the shrine. And everywhere on the floors, on the walls, and even on the roof, where you have Eastern Chalukya inscriptions. You see the Pallava Grantha here. Now, among the numerous inscriptions at that place, I have chosen two for consideration. One, it speaks about the capture of Kanchi by Chalukya king Vikramaditya II. Vikramaditya came with the intention of wreaking revenge for the destruction of Vatapi by Narasimhavarman II. But on seeing the grandeur of Kailasanada temple, he heaped gifts of gold to the temple and left. He captured Kanchipuram, but the architectural wonder of this place captivated him in turn. At Kailasanada temple, the inscriptions that was to be seen all around the central shrine had an obstruction when Venkayya had went to that place to copy the inscriptions. His experience proved that to do epigraphy work, one requires both brains and brawn. Hulsh has written about this in his South Indian inscriptions. See, we'll come to that later. There it is said that the obstruction caused by placing solid granite stones one above the other between the central shrine and the modern mandapam obstructed going round the temple to copy the inscriptions. Venkayya mustered his physical strength and lifting the slab, he coolly went around and copied all the inscriptions. In all these ancient temples, Hulsh was not allowed to enter the main shrine, being a foreigner. So the work of copying the inscriptions devolved upon his assistant Venkayya. Now again we will see another inscription which says that a heavenly voice without a body was heard by Rajasimha Pallava. Venkayya alluded this to an episode on Poosalar Nayanar given in Periya Puranam. There it is said that the Nayanar had built an imaginary temple for Lord Shiva. And Shiva appeared in Rajasimha Pallava's dream and told him that he has got to attend the consecration ceremony for the temple built by his imaginary, of course, his ardent devotee, and that to attend the Kumbhabhishekam of Kailasanada temple, Rajasimha Pallava need to fix a different date. There is also another inscription discovered by Venkayya which compares the illustrious Rajasimha Pallava with Lord Guha. And Venkayya has written that this is the first ever reference made to Lord Subramanya in temple inscriptions. Now, just like in Mamallapuram, in the Kanchipuram Kailasanada temple, we have inscriptions about the Cholas as well. And one of them speaks of Veera Narayana, that is the title of Parantaka Chola the first, who covered the Shiva temple with gold at a place called Vyagra Graha. Also again was perplexed. What place is this? Where could it be found? Venkayya was ready there with the answer. He said, Vyagra Graha is the Sanskrit word for the Tamil Puli tiger village, which is another name for Chidambaram. This again has reference to a legend that a sage with tiger feet had been worshipping Shiva at that place. Venkayya had the firm conviction that the Puranas and the legends are not to be relegated to the limbo of mythology. They may also contain fragments of facts which need to be corroborated with the inscriptions found in temples. Well, why and how come a single temple has inscriptions from the Pallava dynasty, Chola dynasty, and also I told you about the Eastern Chalukya inscriptions on the roof of this temple? This is because one dynasty may build a temple, but subsequent dynasties make additions to it or renovate it, and when they do leave their mark also. That's how we get information on so many dynasties. So from this, it would mean to trace the genealogy of a single dynasty, one has to hop from one temple to another, not necessarily in the same area, but in different regions. And traveling in those days was very difficult. Hulsh would say, even to reach Mahabalipuram, you need to go by boat along the Buckingham Canal or travel by bone-rattling bullock cart from Chengalpet via Tirukazhukunram. Those were the days when transportation and accommodation, if at all available, were very, very primitive. And there was no global positioning system as well, no technology, not even electricity. And Venkayya had copied all these inscriptions. Hulsh had reported on this. Even in Tanjore, which was built much later, with the help of a flickering oil lamp, he took eye copies of all the inscriptions. What a Herculean task he has done. Now, we have the result of all the copying work of inscriptions from various places in various temples. It was the fruitification of South Indian Inscriptions, Volume 1, published in 1890. You can see that they relate to the inscriptions at these places. It was edited by Dr. Hulsh. And in the preface of that volume, he profusely acknowledged Venkayya's help, transcribing the Tamil portion of the inscription found in all these places was a formidable task. You have it here because it was being done for the first time and entirely by Venkayya. He was proficient in both Sanskrit and Tamil. So one whole paragraph Hulsh devoted to applaud Venkayya. Hulsh was large-hearted to admit and admire the scholarship in Venkayya. You see here, for the Tamil inscriptions, I was fortunate enough to be able to have an able and efficient helpmate in my assistant, V.Venkayya, M.A. Venkayya had changed gear from physics to history. The year that he joined as Hulsh assistant in 1887, he registered himself as a private candidate for MA History at Madras University. In 1889, he took his MA degree in history, standing first in the university and knocking off the prestigious Norton Prize, which was a whooping 100 rupees in those days. You are now viewing the maps, which shows you the shift in power between two leading dynasties in that region. In the 7th century, the region reigned by the Pallavas, this is the part, is now being dominated by the Cholas in the 11th century. That occurred with Aparajita Pallava being killed by Aditya the first Chola. So it is that first they brought out the Pallava inscriptions in volume 1. That was the bedrock for Pallava history. Now they started collecting inscriptions for the Chola period. Among the imperial Cholas, the crest jewel will be Rajaraja Chola, the builder of the Sri Rajarajeshwara temple. That was the title given by the Chidambaram temple authorities to Rajaraja Chola for his munificent gifts to that temple. The inscriptions collected from Rajaraja Chola's Katrali, that's how it was known, the big temple, and his sons, Rajendra Chola. He also has left a lot of details in the big temple. They all were brought together, and that resulted in the publication of South Indian Inscriptions Volume 2. The South Indian Inscriptions is a series published by the Archaeological Survey of India. Volume 1 does not have any parts, but by virtue of the fact that the Tanjore temple is very vast and it is full of inscriptions which disgorge wealth of information on every facet of Chola administration, many parts of the volume had to be brought out. Parts 1 to 3 were the joint collaboration of Hulsh and Venkayya. Part 4 was done exclusively by Venkayya after Hulsh had resigned and gone back to Germany. And this was done when his life was ebbing away. He died in 1912 after seeing that the proofs were passed to the press, and returning from Ooty, where the Epigraphy office was working at that time. within a matter of 15 days, he quit his mortal coil. Now we are in Tanjore big temple. Like in Kailasanada temple, you have inscriptions on the pillars, at the basement of the temple, on the walls. But you will see that the script has changed. It was Pallava Grantha that we noted earlier, and now it is all in Tamil Vatteluthu, Tamil Vatteluthu. How did this script come? What is the origin? The origin is to be found in Mangulam inscriptions. Mangulam is a place very close to Madurai. And Madurai means Pandya kingdom. So this Mangulam inscription belonging to the 2nd century, how ancient it is. It's almost Sangam period. During the reign of Pandyan Nedunchezhiyan, was found to be very unique. And none of the scholars could make out anything out of it. Venkayya was asked to read the script and give some clarification in 1906. So he rushed to the place with his assistant K.V. Subramaniam, whom he spotted as a clerk in Nilgiri's collector's office, just as Hulsh spotted him at Mahabalipuram. The script Venkayya found is resembling the edicts of Ashoka, Brahmi. But still, it is not Ashokan Brahmi. It is different. And he sensed that there is inclusion of Dravidian scripts as well. Dravidian scripts would mean there are so many languages, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam. So he kick-started the investigation on Mangulam inscriptions by saying it resembles Brahmi script of Ashoka, and it also seems to include a Dravidian script. It was left at that. Later on, when Venkayya passed away in 1912, K.V. Subramaniam again dashed to this place. That was in 1919. And he then identified Tamil letters, Tamil alphabets. But he did not proceed further. It was all left to Dr. Airavadam Mahadevan, who came much later in 1965, to tell that the whole script is in Tamil. The Brahmi script has been adapted to accommodate the phonetics of the Tamil language, and the name Tamil Brahmi was given to it. So from that evolved the Vatteluthu, just as the current script for Tamil is very much different even from Vatteluthu. The evolution of scripts, the scrutiny of scripts, by itself is a special subject called paleography. By looking at the differences in scripts over time, you can date it. Without chronology, there can't be any history. So now we are back to Vatteluthu. And we will also see the estampage. Estampage, I told you earlier, is the inked impression of the inscription taken at Rajaraja Chola's big temple. And this also is taken from South Indian Inscriptions, Volume 2, Part 1. This is how it looks, the script. Now we have seen the script, the language, but what about the contents? That is very important. You copy the inscriptions, transcribing is done, transliteration done, and the text is produced. But out of it, you have to distill the historical matter. That's the purpose of copying temple inscriptions. So this Tanjore temple amazes us for the wealth, for the amount of information that it discloses. Starting from the conquests, military conquests of the emperor and also of Rajendra Chola. Venkayya would attribute to Rajaraja Chola the innovative practice of recording in every one of his inscriptions his conquests. So that way we get to know the territory ruled by the king. Very, very astonishing would be the land assessments made by Rajaraja Chola. See, look at the land survey that was done. It is won by, I can't read this. See, a wee bit of land of a valley, that is a unit of measurement for land. See, Vincent Smith, while writing the introduction to Sakota Krishnasamy Iyengar's book on ancient India, has remarked that lands under cultivation were carefully surveyed and holdings registered at least a century before the famous Doomsday record of William the Conqueror. What perfection! The lands surveyed definitely will have a land tax imposed. The land tax would be collected either in paddy, that is kind, or in cash. And the unit of account was gold kasu, gold standard. See, was the monetary system. But there were side by side also copper coins for small commercial transactions, local transactions. And this gold kasu weighed exactly 28 grains of gold. See, just as we say, $1 during the gold standard, US dollar, weighed exactly so many troy ounces of gold. Now, we have wages listed for all occupations. That also gives us an idea about the job opportunities that were there during that time. We get to know the temple traditions and festivals. See? And also the most interesting thing, Naivedyam, that has been prepared on a regular basis and on special occasions. Not only the names of the Naivedyams, but also the ingredients, the amount that has to go into their making. So lovers of the culinary art would relish reading all such inscriptions. And at the temple, Devaram and Sanskrit hymns were sung. It should be remembered that Nambi Andar Nambi of Tiruvasaipa was a contemporary of Rajaraja Chola. Shekara came much later, but Nambi Andar Nambi's Tiruvasaipa was very popular. Next follows the endowments that will dilate the pupils of our eyes in wonderment. Endowments were made in kind, like land, from a tiny plot to a large holding. See, endowments could be made. And endowments could be in cash, that is gold kasu. What does the temple do with that? It will loan it at a rate of interest. And what was the rate of interest? 12.5%. How much of information we get to know about the monetary system? See? Then these endowments could also be made as ornaments to the main deities, and the copper images, Jonah Bronzes, are very famous. They have crossed seas and are housed in the museums abroad. And we just heard about the Pattur Nataraja case, which was mentioned by Srimati Sujata Shankar at the outset. See, that was won back by Dr. Nagasamy for the Indian government. These Chola images and the ornaments had been given by royalty, Lokamahadevi, the queen of Rajaraja Chola, and his dear sister Kundavi. See, the names of the ornaments are given along with the donors' names. Many others also have made such endowments. The ornaments for which part of the body, how much of gold did it weigh, what are the gems that are studded in it, the names of the 9 gems are to be found. What is the size of every one of that gem? What is its luster? To such depth of detail we get. And among copper images, you have the copper images of Tirunavukkarasar, Tirunjana Sambandar, Sundarar with his wife Paravayar. All these also were there, and jewels were also given to them. Now the temple employs people for various services, from down to the cleaners and the sweepers. And the Vodvas, the temple priests, the Sanskrit Pandits are all there. And during festivals and even normal days, there are musicians, there are dancers, flag holders, torch bearers, passerole holders. So for all of them, wages were fixed. And there were students learning Vedas for whom stipends were paid. All these payments were in paddy. Temple lands were there because of the endowments. So a portion of the produce, agricultural produce raised, whether it be land or even cattle that were given by the temple for the purpose of getting ghee, one of the dairy product, to light the lamps in the temple. Not a single want of the temple was left unattended to by Rajaraja Chola. That speaks the genius of that emperor as an administrator. So for all these people who are employed, their qualifications, their duties, their service tenure are also spelled out. Very important again would be village administration. More than nearly 150, and there's another set of 40, it doesn't specify that there was a village assembly, but the fact remains that all of them had managed their affairs on their own. So the villages had functioned during his time as little republics. We will come to know more of them later on when we go over to the Uttaramallur village. The Pallavas and the Cholas built not only temples but also tanks. And the Kaveri embankment by Karikala is very famous. They knew for well the importance of irrigation for their agrarian economy. And they also saw to it that they are all well maintained with endowments, and they are also well attended to. Desilting, all those are there. In fact, Venkayya has written an article on irrigation in southern India in ancient times that is even quoted by foreign research scholars. Julia Shaw, Dr. Julia Shaw of Merton College, Oxford, is one such. So the amount of details you get on the Tanjore temple inscriptions will all have to be compared with the copper plates, Cheppede, Tambara Sasanas, issued by the king or by even philanthropists during the regime of that king. Inscriptions can be on stones, lithic records, and it could be on copper plates. They are all royal charters, as explained by Dr. Nagaswamy in his speech earlier. If they are drawn by other philanthropists also, it is on a par with registered documents. So Rajaraja had issued the Leiden grant, which is now in the Leiden University Library, Netherlands. The copper plates get their names either from the place they are found, like Tiruvalangadu plates, or from the place they are currently lodged, like the Leiden grant of Rajaraja. Tiruvalangadu was the grant of Rajendra Chola. Epigraphy is a demanding profession. You have to compare the inscriptions found on the walls of the temple with the copper plates. For Pallava history, Kuram copper plates were very much used. And for this South Indian inscriptions, volume 2 on Tanjore, the Leiden grant was issued. They will see, compare the records found in stone and metal to impart great authenticity for writing, for reconstruction of South Indian history. Now we are just going to view the linguistic diversity found in inscriptions, and we will just take a few copper plates. On them, articles have been written by Venkayya in his report and in the archaeological Epigraphia Indica. They are in various scripts. This is Ranastipundi grant of Vikramaditya, the son-in-law of Rajaraja Chola. Here you find old Telugu, and Venkayya studied old Telugu from Gurazada Apparao, a Tamil Telugu Pandit at Vijayanagaram Samastana and a professor at the Maharaja College of Vijayanagaram. That had appeared. I have given you the source also from which it has been taken. See, there is a hole in the copper plate, and they are all strung together by a ring which could bear a seal, the royal seal. Now this is Kottayam plates of Veeraraghavan. See, where Veeraraghavan, a merchant, See, he is from the merchant community and he is given a title. This script has old Malayalam in it. We come to know that commerce also thrived, but this is of a later period. And from the, as I told you, from the way the script is made out, Venkayya gave the date that it is belonging to the 14th century and it cannot be earlier than that. And it is taken from his article in this journal. Now we have Rajarajendra Chola's Thiruvalangadu plates. As I told you, there is a ring which strings together all the copper plates with a seal, the royal seal. And Rajarajendra Chola had issued coins with the same design. That is why numismatics also could be included within the fold of epigraphy, which in fact Venkayya very much did. He was a numismatist as well. And Hulsh made capital out of it. Well, this was reported, the discovery of the Thiruvalangadu plates, of which Alfred Marshall was very proud of in his report. By that time, he was epigraphist to the government of Madras. Now, we are in a village called Uttaramallur. See, inscriptions. Uttaramallur is very, very famous for laying down the democratic procedures for election to the various committees in a village called Uttaramallur. Venkayya visited this place in 1898 and 71 inscriptions he copied, out of which 2 alone he selected for his report. These 2 inscriptions were made out during the reign of Parantaka Chola I. One was in his 12th year of rule, the other the 14th year of his rule. What was the purpose? We should not be led into thinking that because Parantaka Chola conquered Ceylon and also had the title of Madurai Konda, that he was constantly involved only in war front. He equally devoted time for internal administration. So for Uttaramallur, he sent an officer first time in his 12th year of rule to tell them that they have to frame a set of rules for orderly governance. That was in fact adhered to, but the rules were a bit lax. What would happen? Disorder followed. Maybe embezzlement of funds, defaults, whatever. The information reached Parantaka Chola. So in the 14th year, he again sent another officer to the village with the order that they frame more strict rules for restoring order. Now it should be clearly understood that just because the king sent his officer with an order, it doesn't mean it should immediately take effect. The order will be placed before the village assembly. And village assembly is nothing than the gathering of all the villagers residing at that place. They have to accept. And if accepted only, it takes effect. It will be implemented, not otherwise. Look at the autonomy, amount of autonomy that was there at the grassroots level of Chola administration. So of these two inscriptions, we are going to now consider only one because of the sheer fact the second one, which was during this time of Parantaka Chola's reign, was an improvement over the first. Venkayya had published the results of these two inscriptions in his report. MER means Madras Epigraphy Report. And he also wrote an article, which was a very sensational one, in Archaeological Survey of India annual report published by Marshall. Kanchi Mahaswami was very much impressed by Uttramallur inscriptions. Here you see him at the Uttramallur, the Grama Sabha of the temple, reading out the inscriptions. And then T.N. Seshan, as election commissioner, wanted to have a darshan of Mahaswami and went to Kanchi. The Mahan suggested he go to Uttramallur and see the inscriptions. When the press interviewed him for the success of all his electoral reforms later, he attributed all the success to Mahaswami. In fact, Daivatin Kural Volume 4 has one complete chapter which is over 100 pages on Uttramallur inscriptions. What does this Uttramallur inscription say? How does it start? We, the assembly of Uttarameru Chadurvedi Mangalam, made the following settlement. Look at this first opening sentence. How does the US Constitution drafted in 1786 start? And how does the Indian Constitution drafted in 1946 start? We, the people. See? Will of the people is the will of God. That is how the conviction was in ancient India. And why did they make this settlement? The purpose is spelled out. In order that wicked men may perish while good men might prosper. It should remind us of the last lines of Vishnu Sahasranamam. See? And how long will this order last? It says, thus from this year onwards, as long as the sun and the moon endure, committees, the village committees, shall always be appointed by pot tickets. So now we have to look into the committees and the pot tickets. So here we are. For the purpose of election, there are Uttramallur. Uttramallur is how Venkayya will spell it. Whereas you find this name of the village as Uttaramerur also by other scholars. Now for the purpose of election, this village shall have 30 wards called Kudumbu. And in each ward, the residents, the people residing there, they will in fact select the candidates who have the necessary qualifications. So the rules spelled out the qualifications for the candidates in terms of age, 35 to 70. Education, they should be well versed in mantra brahmanas, that is scriptures, so that they will know what is dharmic and they will abide by dharma. And the property, those who want to contest for election should be residing right then in the house built on their own land, not Poramboku. And they should also be holding land paying taxes. So even to contest for an election, they should have some property at stake. They cannot, in fact, build a house and buy all landed property after having been elected. That is not at all allowed. And how did they earn that property? By honest means. So their past record should be very clean. Conduct was given most important. The purity in public life was held on a high pedestal in those times in ancient India. So the qualifications are given. Disqualifications are also mentioned, like adultery, forgery, cheating, default, or even those who had been elected previously, but they did not submit their accounts at all during the tenure of their office, they are barred. Now, all such people who had been dishonest and notorious, they are forbidden, debarred from election for the rest of their lives. Not only them, their close and close relatives, and even those friends who have had association with them, they are all debarred for life from contesting in an election. Such was the severe retribution. You see? So the villages had been the nursery of virtues in those times. So the selection of the candidates done by the villages, for each one of the candidates that they had nominated, they have not yet selected, it is nomination. The name of each one of the nominated person is written on a palm leaf, volei. See? And all these are bundled together for that particular ward, the nominations, and each nominated candidate having been given a pot ticket called volei. The bundled packets will be 30 in number, because this is being done for every one of the 30 wards. All the 30 packets will be put in a pot and held with an open palm in front of the village assembly. All the people without any excuse have to assemble on a particular fixed date. A little boy, maybe probably a child who does not know about all these politics, he is summoned to pick out a packet. He will do that. And nearby there will be an empty pot kept, into which the contents of that particular packet, which may relate to a particular ward, one of the 30 wards, will be emptied and put inside. Again, the little boy will be required to pick out a volei, pot ticket. And when that is done, the head priest will read the name, and that will be accepted by all others assembled there. So this system of secret ballot practiced then was called as a Kudam Volei Dittam. And that is what we saw earlier, as the members of the committees will be elected by pot tickets alone. Now, how about the committees? The names of the committees are suggestive of the portfolios that they handle, like the tank committee. They're all called variums. The committees are called variums. So tank committee, garden committee, and annual committee. These three picture prominently. The garden committee had 12 members, tank committee will have 6 members, and the annual committee for supervision, general supervision, will have 12 members. So in all you have 30 members, and one person from each ward being in fact pronounced as being elected. There will be 30 members. Now we have said that a boy is there and the head priest will read out their names, and other priests also would have assembled. This is to just impart an element of divinity into the whole process of, call it election or selection by the village. So the procedure has to be repeated, the picking out the pot leaf for every one of the pots in the same way as I explained earlier. The tenure of office is just 1 year. Annually, this exercise is repeated. And there is no security of tenure. During the tenure of office, if a member is found guilty of any offences, he will be promptly dismissed. He is fired. And that is the end of it. He there again cannot contest for the election. Venkayya's reports stimulated studies on village administration. You have a whole list. This is not exhaustive indeed. Only highlights I am giving you. And there again, you find Nagasamy, his book on Uttarameru, the historic village in Tamil Nadu, where he calls that it is a veritable written document. India had a written document in ancient times. See, very unique of its kind. And in fact, Vincent Smith, in his book, The Early History of India, he says, it is a pity that the apparently excellent system of local self-government, really popular in origin, should have died at ages ago. Modern governments would be happier if they could command equally effective local agency. Now we are nearing the end. Venkayya's contribution, I would say that the very collection of inscriptions in those days when there was no facility for transport, accommodation, not even electricity, technology, going to areas, see, in wilderness, searching for inscriptions, and that too by Venkayya, because holes was not permitted inside these ancient temples which were in worship, being a foreigner. So he did it on his own, and this mission had paid dividends to us now for reading South Indian history. Had that work not been done then, valuable inscriptions would have been lost. Even in his own times, Venkayya, in fact, cries out that the inscriptions are being lost by misdirected renovation work and sheer negligence, also ignorance of the local population. Venkayya had confronted many trials and tribulations. And Hulsh had reported, even in Kalahasti, he says, my assistant copied the inscriptions as far as the Chunam will allow. The renovation of the temple then meant smearing the walls which had inscriptions with a thick layer of Chunam. Venkayya had to clean them up, and you should always bear in mind there's no electricity. So with an oil lamp, even in dingy corners, he there will be inscriptions. He had to read them. I copy them. He did it. And Hulsh also said, my assistant had to crouch in unnatural postures to do this epigraphy work. See? And while at Ekambaranada temple at Kanchipuram, he was in fact copying. He was shocked to find the renovation work, whitewashing of the inscriptions had already started. And when he was in Tirukazhukundram, the cave, a portion of the cave was already converted with bricks as a room. And there he had, in fact, to bear the abuses hurled on him. The temple authorities and the locals gathered and called him a thief who had come to rob their temple. They did not know the value of the inscriptions and that it has to be preserved for posterity. Venkayya had to keep his cool, and he was a lover of Tirukural. He would quote Kural in some of his articles. There is one which says, having joined the archaeological survey of India department epigraphy, Venkayya definitely would have recalled this Kural. Agalvu ஆராய்வு தாங்கும் நிலம் போல தம்மை இகழ்வாரை பொறுத்தல் தலை. That's what he had to do, convince them and tell them what these inscriptions are all about. And he had come to preserve them for posterity. Similarly, the copper plates that have been dug out, he tried to convince that it should go to Madras Museum. If Madras Museum is having a good collection of inscriptions, it is in a great measure due to the efforts taken by Venkayya to lodge them in a safe place. And in the case of Triplicane Parthasadi temple, where there are Pallava inscriptions of Dantivarman, he saw that on the way to the Garbhagraha, there were very important inscriptions. So he told the temple authorities to remove it and place it in the Madras Museum, which they refused. So he, in fact, could only tell him that it should be removed at least from that place where people have to pass through and already it is becoming defaced. And it should be lodged in a safe place within the temple. And that was done. See, so if all these efforts had not been taken by Venkayya, today we would have been reading only contrived South Indian history, fabricated. We would not be having South Indian history construed on historical facts and epigraphical evidences. Epigraphical evidences are the primary resource material for reconstruction of South Indian history. All historians who came at a later date, starting with Sakkotai Krishnaswamy Iyengar, K.A. Nilakanta Sastri onwards, they all acknowledge Venkayya's greatness, who had laid out the red carpet for them to write Chola history, Pandya history, because Vijayanagar history, all these inscriptions Venkayya had copied and he had in fact recorded in terms of South Indian inscription volumes. So we have seen all these. Now, Venkayya, I told you, included numismatics as well. So here is the proof. In Epigraphia Indica, Marshall was not very much in favor of promoting numismatics. So the team, Hulsh Venkayya, contributed to the Indian Antiquary, which was another research journal. And you find Venkayya being acknowledged by Hulsh. See, because he was the head of the epigraphy department, and Venkayya was his first assistant. So the articles would appear in the name of Hulsh. Now, this is the visiting card of the great epigraphist when he was the government epigraphist for India. And on July 1911, he, like Dick Whittington, heard a voice telling him, even Rajasima Pallava, you may take it, heard a heavenly voice that he has to wind up his work, his mission, complete his mission on South Indian inscriptions because his end is nearing fast. He rushed to Ooty office for passing on the proofs on South Indian inscriptions. As he left, he was required to submit a memorandum for excavation works because he had assisted Marshall. Marshall will take Venkayya with him for directing excavation works. He was very good at that, Venkayya. Even at Saranath, it is all acknowledged by Marshall himself in his reports. So for this conference of Orientalists that was held at that place, Marshall had gone on leave and the acting Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India at the time was Dr. Vogel. He read out the memorandum drafted by Venkayya. And what did Venkayya suggest? Excavations for Kaveri Pattinam and Tirukkarur. Karur. Dr. Nagasamy has written on Karur coins as well, Roman coins. It shows the commercial prosperity that ancient India had. And these two excavations have been done in recent times, and they have yielded a lot of artifacts, coins, and Venkayya, in fact, had provided the guideline as early as July 1911. Venkayya's personal notes in the year he died, he named it as struggles. In fact, it was agonizing struggle for him, you see, to push through with his failing health. And just for the last 4 months, mid-April to end of July, he has written. And perhaps thereafter he became very busy. He was touring also the whole of North India, Peshawar, Lahore, Taxila, with Marshall, because Marshall wouldn't move without Venkayya, as did Hulsh earlier. And that was that. And last, before he passed away, just 15 days before, he had passed the proofs for South Indian Inscriptions, Volume 2, Part 4. But he did not see it in print. He was no more. And so was Epigraphia Indica. He was the editor. And he had, in fact, almost finished the work. But he died in November on 21st, see, and December only this was published. So the grateful Hulsh stepped in, edited the volume, and dedicated it to Venkayya. His photograph is there before the title page. So that is the end of the great epigraphist. And before I bow out, I would like to give 2 quotes. One taken from Marshall, who lived and worked during the time of Venkayya with him, and the other from C.R. Krishnamacharulu, see, who came later. First, Marshall. He says, see, from first to last, his life in the archaeological department was one of assiduous labor and devotion to duty, and his work throughout was characterized by sound scholarship. and C.R. Krishnamacharyu, Superintendent of Southern Indian Epigraphy, Madras, in the Journal of Andhra Historical Research, Volume 10, that was brought out in 1936-37, he has said, I may transmit to you the opinion handed down to me of his colleagues and assistants that he was a rishi, both in nature and temperament, and in unflinching devotion to duty and truth, a very great desideratum in a research scholar. Thanks very much to Srimati Sujata Shankar, whose relentless efforts had in fact made this presentation on Venkayya a very great event, and to members of the INTACH Chennai chapter for providing a forum with learned audience. I am very much aware that I have exceeded the time limits and I have eaten into your dinner time, but I hope that I have offered some food for thought. And before I wind up, I would like to express I am ever beholden to Dr. Nagasamy, who opened my eyes to Venkayya's works. And the biography that came up was entirely due to his encouragement and his generous sharing of his scholarship. Vanakkam.
Thank you so much, Ma. Can you stop the screen sharing so I get everybody back onto the screen? Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sujata?
Are there any questions or just... Thank you so much, Srimati Sunitha Madhavan, for that wonderful presentation. We could actually feel the journey that Sri Venkayya went through and the monumental contribution that he made to epigraphy, unraveling history from the walls and pillars and copper plates, and how the history of Mahabalipuram, Kanchipuram, Tanjavur and Uttamerur were resurrected with his amazing effort, and how he must have painstakingly copied and deciphered those inscriptions in a place without electricity and light. Just a couple of days ago, I had the opportunity of being in Padmanabhapuram Palace, where I was there at the sort of dusk, and there were no lights, and I can just imagine how difficult it must have been to do that kind of work, what he did. And I really appreciated your highlighting the purity of conduct that was noted in the Uttamerur inscriptions, and how, spelt out the election mode through the inscriptions, and your comment of how the village was a nursery of virtues. I think that was amazing, and we all wish that that's how life would be. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And I must thank Dr. Nagaswamy, the doyen of Heritage and Inscriptions, for his contribution and his sharing of his thoughts on Venkayya, from where he says he's a descendant in terms of his work. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you all for giving a patient listening and being here at this late hour in our part of the world. Thank you so much. Good night.
There's just one question someone has asked, where can we buy this book on Venkayya by Sunitha Madhavan? So where is it possible to purchase this book on Venkayya?
Book can be had from Kanchipuram Sri Kamakoti Book Center online, and payment also can be made online. I can provide you the link. Can you do that?
Okay.
You may email to Mr. Shankara Narayanan. His email ID is Kamakoti Pradeepam. My daughter will type it out.
In the chat box, if you can put it, that will be very helpful.
Yes, so she will do it. I am not competent to handle computer. Kamakoti Pradeepam. Just a minute. Sri Kamakoti Book Center. That is where it is available. When you go to Kanchipuram, or online ordering and online payment will be by the email Kamakoti. Here you are. Kamakoti Pradeepam at gmail.com. And you can contact Satyanarayanan WhatsApp number.
I hope it's being posted on the chat, then it will reach out to everybody.
How do I send it? What's the number? 90038 45456. Got it?
Thank you for the details. Padma, you want to just ask that question? Then we can wind up.
Yes, I'm so sorry to extend the time asking this question, but was V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer his contemporary? Or did they meet?
Yes, yes, very much. I have letters of V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer to Venkayya, and Venkayya's letter to V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer, it had been published by Dr. V.Venkayya. I forget. Venkatachalapati, the historian at the Madras Institute of Development Sciences, and V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer, Uttaradam, he is in charge of those. He also, V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer library, houses all these correspondences between Venkayya and V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer. But it is always V.Venkayya Swaminathan, Venkayya's letters to V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer that you will find there. But V.Venkayya Swaminathan's letter to Venkayya, I have published it in the book also. Yes. So they were very much in touch, and V.Venkayya Swaminathan Iyer had in fact asked for all Venkayya's articles, his reports, to in fact write, and he had acknowledged Venkayya in his publication of Manimegalai also for certain areas of clarification, including the history of the Banas, on which Venkayya had written a paper, the Thiruvalangadu place, that mention of Chola genealogy, because Ottakuthar had sung on 3 Chola kings, about whose history and all Venkayya has researched. So V. Swaminathan was very much in touch with Venkayya, and he was in Presidency College by that time. He had moved over from Kumbakonam Arts College to Presidency College as Tamil Pandit, U.V. Swaminathan.
Okay. Age-wise, were there...
No, age-wise, U.V. Swaminathan was much senior.
Okay.
But age was no bar. It was the intellectual companionship
Scholarship.
that mattered.
Scholarship.
Even who was an elder to Venkayya. Though they started the epigraphy career almost at the same time in the Archaeological Survey of India, because epigraphy was only a branch of that. And by Venkayya's efforts, the collection of epigraphs and detailing the text acquired so much of significance that it compelled the imperial government to set, in fact, a separate department for epigraphy in 1906. So the epigraphy department was created then as the epigraphist to the government of India Post. And Venkayya, there is Marshall's letter to Venkayya, very confidential, and it was with us and we gave it for publication to the British Historical Society. It is also there in the book. Venkayya declined the offer. He said, saddled with the administrative duties, I cannot continue my work of copying South Indian inscriptions. Look at the dedication, the mission that held them. They tied to what they were doing. They were not after fame and money at all. See? But Ramananda Chatterjee, the father of Indian journalism then, he was running the journal Modern Review. In that he gives the reason. Will ever a white man be after a black man for such a high office? There was a reason, because Venkayya was the only person in the whole of India who can decipher South Indian inscriptions. He is given there. It is all in the net, you can see. In
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Downloaded from the net.
Thank you so much. This is thank you very much. Yes, Sujata.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that Sunitha ma'am mentioned A.R. Venkatachalapati, who has the letters of one another year. Venkatachalapati gave a lecture to our audience, I think, about a couple of months ago.
Yes.
I'd like to get in touch, please.
Yes, I did hear that. And A.R. Venkatachalapati was kind enough to share Venkayya's letters to U.V. Swaminathan by WhatsApp. I profusely thank him for that very noble gesture. I got them only after I published the book. So, so much matter is still there to be salvaged. For want of time, I did not do that. And the COVID season also coincided, and many of the libraries were under lockdown. I could not approach them. All the leading universities in America, they have digitized Venkayya's works. And in fact, some of them had sent me a scanned copy of his work also when I needed, because it was with Wildcat, members of the Wildcat Library. I couldn't approach. But thanks to the services of my cousin, who is in Michigan, she was in contact with librarians, and I could get that. Lot of help so many people have done, and it all started only with Dr. Nagasamy. Had it not been for all that, I have not met him at all for my years of having been residing in Chennai. And today's program definitely gave me the consolation of seeing him, at least on the screen, and hearing him. See, thank you, INTACH people, very much.
We have to thank you for that wonderful presentation and
Thank you, ma'am.
the depths of history. Thank you so much.
Thank you and Vanakkam, everyone. Thank you so much.
Vanakkam.
Vanakkam. Bye-bye.
Bye.